Good afternoon, class. This is Miss Allen, and today we are going to work on day 4 of lesson 13, comparing text structures, cause effect, and compare contrast. So the standard for today's lesson is ELA GSE RI 5, and today's learning target is when you compare and contrast how the information in text is structured, you will better understand the purpose of each text. Okay, so we're going to go down to where our first reading or our first text is. And today we will read science articles about the ocean and the sea. First, you will read to understand the information in the text. Then you will read to compare and contrast the structure and the purpose of the text. So we'll go ahead and start reading. Why are the oceans salty? For much of history, it was a mystery why the oceans were salty. Different cultures assumed that oceans began as freshwater and only later became salty, came up with their own explanations. The Vikings related a story of a sailor dropping a magical salt grinder to the bottom of the ocean. People in the Philippines told of a giant who carried sacks of salt from island to island, but then accidentally dropped them all into the sea. Other cultures had similar stories to explain the cause of the ocean's saltiness. Scientists eventually figured out the truth. The stories were correct in one way. The amount of salt in the oceans has increased over time. Where did all the new salt come from? From the land, most rocks contain salts, and over millions of years, the forces of wind, rain, and ice break down the rocks and release the salts. Rainfall carries the salts to rivers, and the river carries the salts into the oceans. As a result, the ocean is salty. Oceans and Seas by Richard Green. Some people use the word ocean and sea interchangeably, but these words refer to different things. An ocean is an enormous body of salt water, such as the Pacific or the Atlantic. In contrast, a sea is a smaller body of salt water, such as the Mediterranean Sea between Africa and Europe. Oceans are so large that people view them as surrounding the continents. The opposite is true for seas. They are surrounded by other larger geographic features. Some seas are entirely encircled by ocean. The Sargasso Sea in the northern Atlantic is an example of this. Other seas, such as Hudson Bay in Canada, are enclosed on some sides by ocean and other sides by land. Finally, a few seas, such as the Caspian in Asia, are completely landlocked within continents. Despite their differences, however, all seas have two things in common. They are made of salt water, and they are smaller than the oceans. Okay, now we're in the Explore section of comparing text structures, cause, effect, and compare and contrast. So for Explore, it's asking us what text structures do the author of each passage mainly use to present information? Think, identify the purpose and the text structure of each passage, then tell what evidence help you to figure out the structure. So for the first passage, why are the oceans salty? We're asking ourselves, what was the author's purpose? So we find that in reading it that the author's purpose is to tell why oceans are salty. What type of text structure is passage 1, why are oceans salty? It is a cause and effect text structure. And how do we know? How would we find evidence of this structure? So evidence of the structure, when we look in the text, it says mystery why, explanations, to explain the cause, and as a result, the oceans are salty. So we have our cause and we have our effect. So our effect is as a result, the ocean is salty. And the cause was the many causes they gave, such as rainwater and rocks being broken up and releasing salt. So that's cause and effect. For passage 2, oceans and seas, what is the author's purpose? So we found that the author's purpose is to describe similarities and differences between oceans and seas and between types of seas. So that type of text structure is compare, contrast. The evidence of the text structure are four pieces of evidence that we receive from the text. The first one is, but these words refer to different things. Also, in contrast, a C is a smaller body. Also, the opposite is true for C's. And finally, two things in common. So two things in common talks about the similarities or comparing. The opposite is true for C's, that's contrast. In contrast, the C is a smaller body is contrasting. And but these words refer to different things is also contrasting. So we just completed our completed our chart for cause and effect and compare and contrast. So the last thing we're going to do is talk. We're going to share our charts. Look for evidence that you found for each text structure. How does each text structure support the author's purpose? If your partner has good evidence that you do not, you can add it to your chart. And of course, we don't have our partners with us, but go ahead and you can just talk about that and look at your evidence. All right. And the last thing is our short response. Explain how the text structure of each passage supports each author's purpose for writing. Use text evidence to support your response. Use the space provided on page 226 to write your answer. So for those of you who have your packets, y'all can write them in your packets. For those of you who have access to your Microsoft Teams, you can write your answers on Microsoft Word and you can actually submit it to me. You can submit it into your Teams. I hope everyone had a good time and enjoyed this lesson, and I will talk with you tomorrow. Have a good day. Bye.